This episode is brought to you by freedadcourse.com. You are always one conversation away from changing your life, and the power of hello is something that I subscribe to every single day, and I'm always saying hello to new people everywhere I go. Increasing your opportunity, increasing your connection, and getting access to the solutions to the problems that you are facing, whether you're on active duty or just beginning your veteran transition or even transitioning out for 20 years. On the other side of hello are the solutions that you're looking for. Again, head on over to freedadcourse.com. Get your 5-episode audio course to create more connection, create more friendships, and get back to living the life that you're trying to design.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home.
Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Killoy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast.
Welcome back to the Military Veteran Dad, episode 50. Feels amazing, unbelievable, almost surprising, a little bit exciting, a little bit overwhelming, but that number 50, we have made it. I would say it's the first official milestone that most podcasters go through. The second big one is when you reach that episode 100, because that generally means you've been doing it for almost 2 years. And right now we are just 1 month shy of publishing for 1 year. And getting through 50 episodes, growing through it, starving my fear, clicking record every week. Let me tell you, it's not easy, and I fight a demon inside that says, don't hit record, but every day or every week I hit record because I know that what we're doing here with this podcast is making an impact, and dads are listening, and we're bringing dads home. I have 2 special things for you today. The first one, I have a special guest, and the special guest isn't an actual guest, it's a story about a guest, and his name is Daniel. And I'd like to describe Daniel to you. Daniel is a 34-year-old dad who served in the Marine Corps, who knew he wanted more for his life. He transitioned out of the uniform, got a job, started a family, but still felt something was missing. He would stay up night wondering how he was going to provide for his family, how he was going to be the dad he knew he wanted to be, how to show up as the husband and create the certainty his wife needed. Daniel looks at his kids and wonders what life he is creating for them to grow into. He is seeking that connection to his wife and kids. He keeps a lot of things bottled up because that is what he was told was the right thing to do. He has conversations in his head that always end with him feeling broken, worthless, and wondering if this is what really life is all about. He is looking for that one thing that will change his life in a radical way. He has big dreams, big ambition, and a heart the size of the ocean. He hears a podcast that says Dad's coming home, and he realizes he's been on autopilot with so much of his life. He says today will be the day. He takes that first step, which begins a journey of discovery, growth, and vulnerability with others in a way he has never known. Now, there's a special treat or a special inside secret with the name Daniel. Daniel is my middle name, and Daniel is the perfect listener for this podcast. But essentially, Daniel is me 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. There was a lot of Daniel still in me. And Daniel is that listener that I think about every time I hit record, because almost every military dad has some chapter relating to Daniel. That maybe you're 100%, maybe you're 75%, maybe you're 50%, but Daniel is the ideal listener because this podcast is what I needed 5 years ago. And had I had it 5 years ago, I would have shortcutted a lot of learnings in my life. And so when I think about what I'm doing with this podcast, where I'm going, where the next 50 episodes will take us, Daniel is always who I have in my mind. Every time I ask when this podcast becomes a business, I always think about what does Daniel need? What does Daniel need to come home? What would have helped him 5 years ago and shortcutted that process and come home sooner? And one of those things that I often talk about in the podcast, and I've done a couple solos on it, is friendships. Friendships is one of those things that Daniel needed 5 years ago. Friendships were the periods in between these sentences that would have helped see the way through these different sentences and the story that he was telling himself. Because friends would have been able to cancel out these thoughts of worthlessness that he was feeling inside. Friendships would have created opportunity to move his life forward. Friendships would have created that connection with his wife that he was looking for. Friendships would have given him the confidence to show up in his kid's life, not as their friend, but as their parent. Because often what Daniel was looking for was a friend, and he was looking for it in his kids. A dangerous recipe. It doesn't end up very well. So when you think about this podcast and you listen to the stories that we're talking about in the past 50 episodes, in the next 50 episodes, keep Daniel in mind, because Daniel is that listener that was me 5 years ago. And if you want to know where I'm going, what's in my head, Daniel, the story of Daniel is my story. That's why I picked him as my middle name, because it allows me to kind of reflect in on myself and allows me to always be able to ask good questions about where the podcast needs to go, what resources to bring, because I'm always have Daniel in the back of my head. And Daniel's not new. Daniel was someone that I created way back last November, almost probably about this time I created Daniel. And Daniel is that person that has been with us this entire podcast, but maybe you didn't know. But his name has been in the memory of each episode for what we're talking about. The questions that I ask are the questions that Daniel needed to hear, or the answers that Daniel needed to hear to the questions. And these are what the guiding principle, this lighthouse of Daniel, he's on a mountain that I'm constantly looking towards and keeping the ship towards that direction. And so, again, as we go forward into the next 50 episodes, I am super excited. We're doubling up on a couple different things. In 2020, we are going to bring more experts. Going to try to bring a better mix of dads and then also experts that can help level up our knowledge in the space of being a dad. That's one place that I didn't really execute as much as I wanted to this year, but in 2020, we're going to step our game up and bring more resources and more knowledge to execute on your marriage, your friendship, or not really your friendships with your kids, but your relationship with your kids, your career, all of these things, working through all the things you don't want to talk about. These are the things we're going to bring in experts that maybe don't always have a military connection, but these are things that we're going to bring into the podcast because these people helped me 5 years ago in other podcasts as I listened to them. And these people I want to bring in our podcast to help us come home as well. The second part that I want to gift you today is a blog post that I just published on militaryveterandad.com if you want to read the post. But I'll give you the verbal version of it. So on Friday, it was Friday. On Friday, we were watching our favorite new Netflix Christmas movie as a family, which was The Christmas Chronicles. And it's a new Netflix movie of last year, 2018. And it was a really good movie last year to me. But this year when I watched it, towards the end, I just couldn't help but get super emotional. And not for sad reasons, but reasons of joy. And it was ultimately triggered from the emotion of having this podcast on my heart weekly and knowing what this podcast means to other dads and the message in this movie. So without giving the movie away, there's a message in this movie that your dad will gift you things that you often don't know what they're for or how to use them. And in this movie, his dad dies. The son in the movie the dad dies for is a firefighter. And he doesn't understand how his dad was able to give selflessly to so many others and then ultimately pay the sacrifice for others. And now he's left alone without a dad. And on a utility knife, there's a quote carved into the wood that says, "A Pierce always sees it through." And ultimately, this son was looking for validation in all the wrong places. He was looking for all of the different external validations that he was good enough, that he could be something. And he was ultimately looking for that feeling of love that when his dad passed, he really didn't know how to replace. And the movie is a little bit of a story about him coming back and coming home to be the big brother to his sister that he needs to be. But he's often too egocentric to see that in the beginning of the movie. And at the end, he really steps into the belief that he had everything that he needed to believe in himself. And when he believes in himself, he's able to do an amazing thing at the end of the movie. You'll see it'll make perfect sense when you watch the movie. It's on Netflix. I'll put a link to it in the show notes if you want to shortcut it or see the trailer of it. But this idea of giving our kids the belief in themselves is something that really hit me hard. Because as military dads, this is something we have not just an opportunity to give our kids, we have an obligation to make sure that the adults we put into the world believe in themselves. Because in 2019, and when our kids are older than 2020, 2025, 2030 even, I can only imagine where society will be. But I know confidence in ourselves isn't going to go anywhere. That this is something that still will drive a life forward or hold it back. Because how many people out there stay in neutral because they do lack the confidence to move forward. They lack the confidence to take action in their life, to believe that they have everything inside that they need to go out and change the world. And that's kind of the story of that movie. It was at the end where this kid kind of really was gifted from Santa in this case, because his dad was gone, or reminded of it from Santa, that he had everything inside to do everything that he ever wanted. He just needed to believe in himself that he could do it. And as a military dad, knowing what we've experienced, knowing the trials and tribulations that we've gone through, maybe it's we've experienced the loss of a friend, all of these things that we've talked about in the podcast, if we're able to build a confident individual with these stories, with these lessons, maybe with it just going out in the woods and doing a kind of indoctrination with our kids, our son, making sure they grow up and understand what it is to be a man and to know your power in the world, that when you go out in the world and shape it, the world can be yours to shape. And the same thing goes for women, that a confident woman can go out in the world and shape it as well. And when a child has the gift of believing in themselves, a crazy thing happens. They generally go out into the world and do change it because they believe they can. And just think how many people out there look for the Instagram followers, the Facebook followers, the Twitter followers, that this is where their external validation comes from, that they can't do anything unless maybe they've asked their friends on Instagram, or maybe they're worried about what their Instagram friends are going to say. A confident individual knows what's right and wrong and takes that step because they believe it's the right thing without worrying about what everybody else thinks. And as a military dad, this is something that we have an obligation to make sure that our kids have as a very strong cornerstone to the personality and life that they go out into the world and build. Think about that knife from the movie that says, "A pierce will always pierce it through." Imagine if that was something that was handed down from every generation, or something that every boy was given in your family. And maybe that was your name instead of Pierce. Maybe that said, "The Killoys always sees it through." And he held that in his pocket. And maybe you did pass and you no longer are there, but he has this reminder, this sentence that describes the legacy. That sentence will give him power and courage to go out there and do and accomplish the things he said he was going to do, that his word matters and that you always see it through and you don't quit. That's what building a legacy is about, that we talk about so often on the podcast. Building something so strong that it moves a person to take action even after you're gone. That when you think about a kid going out into the world with confidence, think about what you want to be remembered for after you're gone. What do you want passed on to you? Because the best part of this movie that I at the end of it was seeing the son step into his being without his dad being there. And it's just a great story of how he comes home in the movie and reconnects with the family. And it's a classic happy ending. Think about when times get hard. Maybe you didn't die, or maybe the loss of a parents, or any loss. When you seek external validation in the world, and I was been guilty of this a lot because I was seeking external validation for who I was. When you have external validation, life is harder because you don't know how to have the confidence to take a step, to get out of bed, to do what you need to do when there's nobody there, or when you feel like nothing, like just eating Oreos and ice cream. You need the confidence to take action. But if you're seeking that external validation from your Instagram followers, it's not going to work. That's not how you're going to be able to sustain confidence through your life. So this is why it's so important for us military dads to come home, because these trials. Life is happening for our kids right now. Their confidence is being shaped for the better or for the worse. And as a military dad, we have such an amazing arsenal of tools from all walks of our life to help make sure they go out into the world confident in who they are, that they know who they are, they know what they value, they know what they stand against, and they have some direction for where they're headed. And maybe it's not the direction that you want, but making sure they just at least know some semi-direction, that at least they're following what they're curious about, that they have an idea maybe what they're passionate about. These are some of the core things we can gift our kids. And the title of the blog post was the best gift we can give our kids at Christmas actually is the gift of believing themselves, because that one will sustain them far past one day of the year, far past that one toy they play with for a week. That one will sustain them for the entire time that your name is remembered, because a gift of confidence and a belief in themselves can really shape the world in a way where your name is never forgotten. So as we go out into December to get caught up in the hype of Christmas, to buy toys for our kids and all the stuff that we get going for kids, just remember that confidence, the belief in themselves is the best gift. And maybe a good present for them is an experiential gift that teaches them a little bit about how to believe in themselves, that they have everything they need in their life already right inside. With that, we'll sign off. Dads, have an awesome week, and we'll see you next week.
That's a wrap. And thank you for listening to today's show, and I really hope you enjoyed it. The lifeblood of any new podcast are the reviews. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes, I would really appreciate it, and you will help us get the message out to even more military veteran dads. As John Maxwell says, if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Dads, it's time to come home.